Wednesday in Simpsonville, South Carolina, and I've just come back from the hospital where a lady in our church got a good report that they were able to do an ablation successfully, and she should have a normal rest of her life. It's a wonderful thing when you see prayers answered. It's a wonderful thing when you see the love of a family and their care for their loved one as they go through a procedure like that. Well, we're looking at the final week before Jesus went to the cross of Calvary, and we're looking at it through all four of the Gospels, and we're looking at it day by day and trying to correspond those days with the actual days of this week. And so today we're looking at Tuesday. However, it's hard to untangle Tuesday and Wednesday, so we'll be taking some of those subjects for today and some for tomorrow. Not sure which occurred on Tuesday and which occurred on Wednesday, but a lot of interesting things. Jesus' time of popularity has passed. Now he's come under extreme scrutiny, particularly from the Jews, from his own people, from the ones that pretend to be followers of God. And we find testing constantly. The first event that we see, of course, is the results of the cursing of the fig tree of yesterday. And, of course, the tree has withered instantly. If any of you have ever tried to kill weeds or plants deliberately with something like Roundup, you know it takes time. It's not overnight. And yet here this fig tree has died instantly. It made a profession without possession, and now it is dead, will never bear fruit again. And the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees have all kind of joined together, even though they're kind of opponents of each other, and are testing Jesus every chance they get. One of the questions that they give to Jesus, they feel it would be a horns of dilemma type question. That is, by whose authority are you doing these things? That is, cleansing the temple and teaching in the temple. And Jesus does what he always masterfully did, and that is he answered a question with a question. He said, I'll answer your question if you'll answer me a question. And they, of course, agreed. And he said, by whose authority did John baptize? By heaven or by man's? Now, they were on the horns dilemma. If they said that John was baptizing by the authority of heaven, then they would be ridiculed for why they had not accepted John. On the other hand, if they said that John was baptizing by the authority of man, then they would alienate all of those thousands of followers of John, and so they refused to answer the question, and Jesus refused to answer their question. You see, it was not quite yet time for Jesus to go to the cross. God's timing is always perfect, and he times every event just exactly as God would have him to time those events. The second thing that we see in this Tuesday, Wednesday time frame is a parable, first of all, of the two sons. You may remember that parable. The parable says that the father asked the two boys to go out and work in the field. One said no, he wouldn't. The other one said yes, he would. The problem was, very much like we have today, the son that said he wouldn't started feeling guilty and realized that he needed to go out and do what his father asked, and he did. The one that said he would go out in the field, he did just the opposite. He had told his father he would, but he didn't. And Jesus asked the question, which one of the sons do you think the father was more pleased with? Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. Has God ever asked you to do something? You said you would, but you didn't. Has God ever asked you to do something and you said you wouldn't, but later on you decided, yeah, that's really what I need to be doing? Which one of those children do you think the father's more pleased with? Certainly the greatest pleasure would be one that said he would and then did. But neither one of the sons had answered that way, and many times we don't either. The second parable that he told was the parable of the man that owned a great vineyard, went off on a long journey, sent some of his slaves back to check and see how the vineyard was doing, as it had been left in a trust to work the vineyard. And they mistreated his slaves. He sent some more slaves and some more slaves, and finally he sent his son, and they killed his son. Now this parable is very pointed, and is very pointed at the Jew. Because you see, God had left the Jews as a chosen people with a promised land. And he was looking for them to bear some fruit, to bring forth some glory to him. He sent his prophets. His people abused the prophets. He sent his son, and soon, in just a few days, they would kill his son. Well, this was a very pointed parable. It was a prophetic parable. And we too must realize that God has left us as stewards of all that we have. And it's not unreasonable for him occasionally to send back and say, how have you done with what I left you with? How have you done with what I've entrusted you with? Now, we're not going to beat up his prophets, and we're not going to kill his son again. But certainly we do seem to defy his prophets and abuse his son by our not using good stewardship. And finally, the third story that I want to cover today, and then we'll look at the others tomorrow, is when they came to trick Jesus by asking him whether it was lawful to pay Caesar tribute, a tax, if you will, a poll tax perhaps. And Jesus very, very wisely said, bring me a denarius. Whose picture is on that coin? They said, Caesar's. He said, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and give unto God that which is God's. And I'd ask you today, as you think about particularly the upcoming Easter Sunday, the call for missions giving, the call for worship giving, the call to return to God, what's God's already, and ask you, you won't hesitate to pay your taxes this year, I'm sure. You won't hesitate to claim your return if you overpaid your taxes this year. You give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but are you giving to God what is God's? That's your thought for the day. I hope you'll dwell on that for a little bit. God bless you and have a great day.